had you read 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7. And out of those verses, what can you tell me that stands out to you according to your definition of love? Of those 4 verses, what really sticks out to you the most?
So I think as you guys have been talking about and what you guys have already seen through this web series, is that love ultimately, just like any Christian's definition of it, should always come out of what Christ did for us. And as you read these passages, the one thing that just stands out, is the fact that love is never failing. I think it's the very last verse in that selection, but it almost brings everything together that Paul talks about here. Yes, love is patient. Yes, love is kind. Yes, love knows no bounds. But at the very end of the day, love is never failing. And it talks a lot about who our Christ is, right? Who Jesus is for us. Since love is never failing and we know that it comes out of Jesus, we know that Jesus is never going to fail us either.
Hey guys, and I'm glad you guys are watching week 2 of our love series. Last week we dove in and we read about 3 verses that Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians to the Corinthians. And today we're going to continue in 1 Corinthians 13. So for those of you who don't know, that was my roommate Stephen that I interviewed. And I asked him this question. Based off of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7, what stands out to you the most based off of your definition of love? So what Stephen did is he took his definition, his idea of love, and he said, what stands out to me the most in these verses? And for him, the beginning of verse 8, which is attached on to verses 4 through 7, it says, love never fails. And for Stephen, based off of what Paul says there, what Stephen was saying was that this is the crux of what Paul has to say about love, because ultimately this ties into what Jesus did for us through his love. As Irv talked about a few weeks back. In his interview, Stephen said that the love of Jesus never fails. This week is going to be a little different than it was last week. We're going to be really looking at more inward things than we are outward things. Last week, remember, I gave you guys a challenge of loving people that you really like, and then people that you really don't like so much, people that you have issues loving. And I encourage you guys to reach out for this past week and really try and love on those people. Well, this week we're going to be talking more about the inside. This week we're going to be talking more about our heart conditions. So if you will, join me in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, starting in verse 4. It says, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always preserves. Love never fails. Now this is going to be a really short lesson this week because I want to get right to the point. Paul is saying that if you have this love, because remember last week we talked about Paul was telling the Corinthians that they didn't have love because they were too busy comparing themselves to each other. Paul says, when you have this love, you will show these characteristics. And so one thing that my youth pastor taught me when reading this passage, wherever it says love, put your name there. Check this out. When I'm displaying love, that means I'm doing these things. Verse 4, Garrett is patient. Garrett is kind. Garrett does not envy. He does not boast. Garrett is not proud. Garrett does not dishonor others. Garrett is not self-seeking. Garrett is not easily angered. He keeps no record of wrongs. Garrett does not delight in evil, but he rejoices with the truth. He always protects, always trusts. He always hopes and always preserves. I want you to do the same thing with your name and ask yourself, is that true? Is that true of you today? When you put your name in there, Jacob, Bailey Ann, Caden, when you guys put your names in there, does it ring out true? This one always gets me. Garrett keeps no records of wrong. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes when someone wrongs you, when someone upsets you, when someone gets you angry, when you don't really like that person, it's really, really, really easy to keep a record. To kind of write down like, okay, on this day, you said this, and I didn't like the fact that you said that. And you bring it up, and you bring it up, and you bring it up. And maybe that's the root of why you don't like that person, because of that one thing that they did. But according to this, if we actually have love and we show love, then we will not have a record of wrong towards other people. Here's another one. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Are you holy? Are you set apart? Paul is saying here, when your life is characterized by love, you will rejoice in what is right. You will not enjoy, you will not like sin. You'll hate sin when true love is in you. So this week's vlog is short, sweet, and to the point, but I want to encourage you guys. Put yourselves in this situation. When Paul was talking to the Corinthians, it was saying, you guys don't have love. But when you do have love, it should look like this. That speaks to us, ever true, just as much as it does to them. Once we stop comparing ourselves to others and start trying to show love, is this a godly love that we're showing these people? Put yourself in that. Am I being patient with them? Am I being kind to them? Am I not keeping a record of wrong? Am I not easily angered? What that means is you don't easily get angered when someone says something that you don't like. You don't fly off the handle at them. I know there's a lot of times where I'm not perfect. There's times where I'm not patient. There's times where I'm not kind. There's times where I get easily angered. There's times when I hold grudges towards people. And I have to ask God for forgiveness. And so I want to encourage you guys to do that right now. As soon as this video is over, if there's ever been a time in your life, particularly these past few weeks, that you can think of, where you haven't been patient with someone, where you haven't been very kind to someone, that's sin, guys. And it's not okay. According to God, that's not showing love. And so I want to encourage you guys at the end of this video to ask for forgiveness. I had to do the same thing when I read this. I had to say, God, forgive me for when I wasn't patient with that person. Forgive me when I wasn't kind to those people. Forgive me when I was easily angered with my roommate because he left the kitchen a mess. I hope this week has been encouraging, but it's also been eye-opening for you guys. I know it was a little more serious than last week, but I hope next week we have good discussion about it, good wholesome discussion, and maybe we'll spur each other to start loving others more. Maybe we can encourage each other to be patient with one another and hold each other accountable to things like that. So I'll see you guys next Wednesday at 7:45. That's right at the end of youth, the last 15 minutes. We're going to talk about this. God bless.